So let's look at that questionnaire because you're going to use it to write 2 article critiques yourself for this class. Here is that questionnaire that you will be using. To critique a couple of articles. And let's look down it. It covers the research problem. So as you read through the beginnings of the research, you're going to be looking at, well, what is the research problem? Can you identify it? Do you understand it? In what ways does the author justify the significance or the importance of the research? And these are all things you have to do as you write an article or as you write your dissertation. And so you can critique other research on these questions as well. In the literature review, is the literature relevant to the topic being studied? Is it current? If all the literature for a research article is 10 years old, really, how relevant is that problem? How well did that author do at incorporating or putting their own research in context? That's something to look at. When it comes to research design, what type of design is the author using? Is it qualitative? Is it quantitative? Are they running an experiment? I mean, all of that is going to tell you in the future, how should the variables be measured? What kind of data analysis should the author be allowed to do, depending on the research problem and the design? Is the method appropriate to address the questions? Why or why not? Recall that the problem drives the design drives the measurement of the variables, the measurement of the variables drives the types of analyses that you can run. What are the hypotheses? Sometimes hypotheses aren't going to necessarily be explicitly stated. Sometimes they are. Can you identify what they are? What was the researcher hoping to find? What are the variables of the study? This is the whole methodology section. How are they defined? What's the dependent variable? What's the independent variable? Does the author identify control variables? What kind of model does the author set up for what they're going to try to study? Number 6, how are those variables measured? What level of measurement are they measured at? Along with that, in the methodology section, what about measurement validity, measurement reliability? Recall that Voigt recommends that regardless of how valid or reliable others have said your measures are, you still need to run your own tests for validity and reliability on your measures. Validity and reliability comes up again, as we know. It comes up in the design, it comes up in the analysis. Sampling, number 7. To what population does the author intend to generalize the findings? Meaning, not the audience for the research, not the audience, but taking a look at the sample. What is the larger population of that sample? If I'm taking a sample of currently enrolled students at the college, then the population to which I'm trying to generalize the findings is all currently enrolled students at the college. I could even take that a step farther and say I'm really trying to generalize to all college students. But I would have to caveat that and say, well, but my sample only comes from one college, and the focus of this college is an associate's level degree. I'd have to create caveats. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about sampling. But you can still talk about the population that the author intends to generalize the findings to, because typically they'll come right out and say it. You can describe the author's sampling techniques, and you'll be able to do that after the next module in detail. What are the main characteristics of the sample? Who are they? How many are there? How does the sampling methodology impact the reliability and the validity of the study? Recall, external validity is related to generalizability of the results, and that has to do with how the sample is selected. Instrumentation. How does the author intend to collect the data? Is it surveys? Is it through interviews? Is it focus groups? Is it through observation and tally sheets? Is it through field research? Describe how the author intends to do that, because they need to describe it. They need to describe the procedures for how the data are collected in detail. Because remember, part of the scientific method is a rigid procedure for how the data are collected and analyzed. That way, the study could be replicated. How does the author ensure validity and reliability of the instrumentation, the surveys? That's one way they're going to collect the data. Data analysis. What descriptive statistics are used? What inferential statistics are used? Were they appropriate statistics for how the variables were measured? We'll learn a little bit more about that in Module 10. But you can right now comment on what descriptive statistics are used. What are the results? What did the authors or the author find when they ran their data analysis? Finally, in the discussion section, it is critical that in the discussion section or the conclusion, that authors talk about the implications of their findings. What are the implications of the findings? And what are the recommendations for future research? Those are two important pieces that need to be included in a conclusion of a dissertation or of a research article. So these are the questions, even as you do a literature review, that you can go through to create notes for your literature review. Do you buy the research? Is there something that can be improved upon? Because anything like that will help you define what your research problem is. For this section, for this module, one of the exercises is to create an article critique using these questions as a guide. This ends this part of the module's presentation. Please move on to review the next part